Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel. And today we continue our interview with Jeff Smith, CEO of Providence Medical, a medical technology company that specializes in cervical spinal conditions. So last week, we got to learn about how Jeff came to be the CEO of Providence. We're going to continue that story and what has established him as a serial entrepreneur. But in this second part, we also get into the power of social media, what it's doing for him, what it's doing for medical sales reps, and why it's so important. You know, COVID really opened things up as far as how it should be utilized, why it should be utilized. And now it's taken on a life of its own. And providers are seeing it as a way to share information, which is such a valuable thing because they're educating their colleagues live. And medical sales reps are also seen as a way to be a better resource to their customers. At Evolve Your Success, we provide those services for both medical sales reps and medical providers. And it's just so great to talk with someone that's in a leadership position that completely understands and sees the value in what's happening with social media. So as always, thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. We do our best to bring you insightful information and new innovations so that you can enhance your career in the medical sales space. And I really do hope you enjoy this interview. Exactly.
I love business and entrepreneurship. I just got to meet, whether it's clinical, regulatory, business development, finance, marketing, I got to meet all the people.
Right.
And it was at Kaifon where I did a sales ops job. We bought 2 companies in the span of three. The first one was this little business out of Stanford, this great surgeon founder, Todd Alleman. And he developed a discography product, which was awesome. We bought it. And then we bought St. Francis Medical Technologies, which was like a $700 million acquisition.
Wow. Another
business. And so this little discography product wasn't getting any attention, and I wanted to get back to selling and candidly making some money because the family was getting bigger.
Right.
So I got the chance. I pitched the senior leadership, and I got the budget to hire a 20-person direct sales force.
Nice.
And I worked with a guy named David Schumers, who was the marketing counterpart. And we did this for about a year, and it was awesome. The only downside was the product didn't have reimbursement, and it didn't work.
That's a big downside, Jeff. Big downside.
So anyway, right around that time, Medtronic acquired Kaifon. I had just admired the heck out of Art Taylor from afar, and we get to talk to him here and there. When Medtronic acquired Kaifon, there was this moment where you had to sign like a non-compete that you were going to be Medtronic Blue for life. And I thought maybe I would do it because it's such a good business. But it was right around that time that Dr. McCormick, who had been my customer, is a neurosurgeon, spine surgeon in San Francisco. He calls me out of the blue and he's like, I want to tell you about an idea. And that became Providence Medical Technology.
Wow. Okay. What year was this?
It's 2007 and 8.
Okay. Wow. And that's what kicked off Providence.
Yeah, I didn't sign the Medtronic transition package, and it was June of 2008. I wrote a post on this on LinkedIn. We just had my 3rd son, Brady, and left my job. We raised $1 million, and it was go time. And I've been doing Providence ever since.
Wow, that is a story and a half. Okay, so you're a serial entrepreneur, though, and you have 6 businesses under your belt? 6 businesses, right? Okay, so let's exclude Soul Gear and the .com. Where in this journey did the other businesses happen? I mean, Providence started 14 years ago, so I'm assuming they all started after Providence. How did you fit that in?
Well, so Pacific Surgical, my wife is a Canadian citizen and a U.S. citizen, but she was born in the Philippines. And so I visited the Philippines in 2005. I was a year into Kaifon, and I was just like, I was drinking the Kool-Aid. There was some
Okay.
downtime in Manila, staying at my wife's family's house. So I got a ride to this hospital, and I started pitching spine surgeons. Turned out there was a surgeon, Dr. Jose Paiso, who had heard about kyphoplasty. He's like, we would do this all day long. So I wrote a business plan. I pitched it to my manager at the time, Steve Carmody, who was my regional sales manager. And it was, I did a lot of research. I really went for it on this plan.
Yeah.
He liked it enough to forward it up the chain. And I ended up in Philadelphia. It was my first North American Spine Society in 2005. And I was pitching the vice president of emerging markets, Richard Heaslip,
Wow.
who's a dear friend. He now works at Google.
Okay.
He worked at Providence for a minute, for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
But they said, yeah. And the offer was 75 million people. They speak English primarily, and they don't have access to the best products. We want the exclusive distributorship rights for balloon kyphoplasty. Richard, I know this now because I have a little more perspective. The Philippines was not a big market on his strategic plan. He's like, sure, we'll give it a shot. So, I want to be clear in this. So Will Steedman and I, we started this business. He moved from San Francisco to Manila, sight unseen, and we began the process of starting a distributorship, and we were financing the whole thing. And so I am not currently involved with Pacific Surgical as an operator or even a board member. But what Will has done is built the largest medical distributorship in the Philippines. Mm-hmm. They sell everything, you name it. And so that was Pacific Surgical. Providence Medical Technology was founded at the same time Thayer Intellectual Property was founded. And part of that was in the early days of Providence, we designed our first implant instrument system. We started a clinical trial in the Philippines. There's some good surgeons there. Mm-hmm. And we had downtime. So he had another idea for carpal tunnel release. Okay. And it was the idea of really cutting from the inside out. Carpal tunnel is 500,000 of these surgeries done a year, a very common problem. And most of it's done through an incision in the palm. Mm-hmm. There had been this spike of innovation really in the late 90s, early 2000s using an endoscope. And despite the very incredible data showing endoscopic was better for the patient, unbeknownst to us at the time, there were reimbursement considerations that was stifling its adoption. Mm-hmm. But Dr. McCormick had this awesome idea where you would throw we developed this thing called the Monos carpal tunnel release. Okay. Same engineers that we worked with at Providence as consultants, they designed this thing, and it was amazing. We'd go through, it would be like proximal to the wrist. You'd go underneath the transverse carpal ligament that you were trying to cut, but you would cut it from the inside out and preserve all the tissue in the palm, which has exquisite innervation, and it's really, you don't want to mess with that tissue. So we raised some money for that. It's like maybe $4 million, and we were off to commercialize. And so I was just doing the Kaifon playbook. The problem is, and this is one of the episodes on Unmet Need talking about the unit economics. The total facility reimbursement at the hospital or surgery center for a carpal tunnel release, it's like $1,500. So you can't charge $2,000 for your device. Sure. So the most we could charge was $900. That was like where the price. I recruited all these great direct sales reps, and like you would have to do 100 cases a month to make any money. Right. But what we found after 2 years, and we got this thing to like 5 million in sales. We had clinical papers. You could look up Mono's carpal tunnel release. We're on TV. It was awesome. It is an awesome
Wow.
product.
Wow.
But there was just, we almost sold the business the second year, had a term sheet. It was going to be great. I was like, man.
So this was all while you were working at Kaifon?
No, this was 2008 to 2014.
So it's around the same time as Providence is going, and this has happened at the same time.
Yeah, I was working out of Dr. McCormick's. He has a medical building, and so we had space. But, you know, we were just always together, and he had so many great ideas, and I was ready to do anything.
Wow.
So by 2014, we were on our way with Providence. Richard Heaslip, he had worked so he did really well when Kaifon was acquired. Then he got recruited to Keystone Dental. He did that for a couple years.
Okay.
I think it was like it was a Warburg Pincus portfolio company. And that was acquired. And he's like, yeah, let's do this. I'll be your international sales vice president.
Wow.
And we got a CE mark, and we were selling the D-Trax facet system in Europe while also building this US sales force for Thayer. And it started getting really tight. We were always raising money for both companies. Most of the time, the same investors, because they're like, I don't know which one of these things is going to hit, but these guys seem to be committed. And in 2014, it was clear Thayer was going to be hard, this carpal tunnel business. Yeah. So we started winding that down, and that was the year that Providence, we raised our first venture financing. We got a couple of our products FDA cleared.
Okay.
And we raised our first venture financing. And so then we just, we wound down Thayer by 2015. But it was at that same moment where a couple of the Providence people and we said, like, why don't we start an incubator? Because surgeons were always calling saying, hey, I got an idea. And we developed this way of scoring the likelihood of success. And so surgeons would pitch us. We give them this very quantitative assessment of their idea.
Wow.
Really based on market size, degree of unmet clinical need, the attractiveness as the physician call point, we would do this reimbursement, ASP arbitrage, where we'd say, all right, if you can get this case, the reimbursement's $25,000 for the hospital. There's enough room that if you solve this problem, you can make some money. And so we did 2 businesses at Prospect Health. The first was a business called Column. 2 surgeons, Bradley Jones in Redding, California. Chico, and then Sandeep Kunwar on the peninsula. And it was just a simple spinal implant. And what we saw is there was a change in reimbursement for anterior cervical fusion. And the CMS had determined that the use of a standalone cage, meaning no plate, integrated screw fixation, that surgeons would no longer be able to bill this one add-on code.
Got it.
So we developed basically a product that worked like a standalone, but met the code criteria.
Wow.
We made a prototype. Shig Tanaka, who's been running R&D at Providence forever, he had come over to work at Prospect, and we ended up selling it to Spinewave. Totally structured deal. It was a great deal for them. And that product today is called Paramount.
Wow.
And it's still, it was a lesson. We didn't put much money in.
Yeah.
We sold it in a structured deal, meaning you get a little up front, a little when they're done, little with FDA, and then a piece of the sale for quite some time. But that was like, all right, this is validation of this model.
Yeah.
But what was happening at that time is Providence, we hired a VP of sales, we were hiring reps, and we had venture now. So we had to go. They expected growth. But every time we'd hire a rep, we'd go into a market, the rep was, ready to sell, but we didn't have hospital approval. So everything for Providence, it was like the brake lights of hospital approval.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right around the time that clinical value analysis was becoming a specialty amongst hospital administrators.
Okay.
And it was really just the discipline of saying, we can't sell it. We can't use everything here. So we have to look at, is there clinical value that you could substantiate through evidence, do the economics work. And every time it involved a bunch of hospital administrators and busy docs having to sign a bunch of stuff, and ultimately show up at some meeting at 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this can be fixed. Ed Liu and I were kicking around ideas, our chief operating officer, Kaifan, and I said, I want to develop a cloud-based software that very efficiently gets all these signatures lined up, all the materials that are part of a clinical value analysis submission that the sales rep is responsible for sending in, which you never know if it's the most recent or it's the right thing. So we created Greenlight Medical, which was, it was a cloud-based platform for clinical value analysis. And the summer before that, I think it was 2015, I met the super sharp guy, Austin Dirks, it was the summer between his first and second year at Harvard Business School at a Wilson Sonsini investor conference. Mm-hmm. We're both waiting in line, trying to get 5 minutes with the VC that had presented.
Right.
This guy's like younger, smarter, sharper. He had been a sales rep at St. Jude, then got into Harvard Business School. And I was like, why don't you join us? Come work at Prospect Health. So he accepted the job running business development for Prospect.
Wow.
But in the 3 months from offer to him graduating Harvard Business School, we had become so taken with this idea for Greenlight Medical.
Sure.
So his first day, he shows up at our office, and I was like, Austin, what do you think about running this thing? This is it. This is what we're doing. And to his credit, and I can't say this enough, he's like, thinks he's joining this incubator. We got way too much going on. Everything was about Providence.
Right.
But Prospect Health had enough investment, just small amount of investment. We had a team, office. But so he was there with us for, I want to say like 6 to 9 months. And then we made him the CEO. He got all the things that you would imagine a founder would get. And then he went off.
Of Greenlight Medical.
Of Greenlight Medical.
Right. Okay. And then he went off.
He got an office space at, oh my goodness, what's the name of the business? It's like the big EHR company that like George Bush's like cousin. Anyway, he got this office space at this really cool an incubator, a software company was putting on. And then he went and to Austin's credit, he raised money, he built a product. I was on the board of directors there and the chairman from, I don't know, really up until 2017, 16, something like that.
Yeah.
And by then Austin he's got great instincts. He's great at selling. He's good at raising capital. He had raised money from a fund in Nashville, which was becoming the hub for digital health, particularly anything involving hospitals, because that's the home of like HCA, and there's just a lot of that work there.
Sure.
He built it into a business, and I was focused on Providence. And so anyway, when he sold that business this year in 2022,
wow,
it was just, an unbelievable accomplishment. All the credit goes to Austin and his team. Steven Sane, who's the technical co-founder, they built a great business. But in the last 2 years, there had been so much consolidation. Other clinical value analysis platforms emerged, and they were all being acquired. And it was the fourth quarter of last year where, I was just catching up with Austin. I was like, it might be time. Right. Maybe we don't want the music to stop.
Right.
Everyone that could buy one of these things has bought one, and we're going up against, better financed, bigger competitors. And so he thought about it, talked to his advisors, people he respected, and he made a decision to, get an advisor. And I can't speak really about the acquisition or any of the details because I'm under NDA, but he succeeded in a great outcome that life-changing event for anyone involved. And, meanwhile, we're still building Providence. We did over 25 million in sales last year. We'll grow 25% again.
Nice.
Doing the largest prospective randomized controlled trial in spine. Nice. And it really gave me perspective, Samuel. And it's one of the themes when I try to, share my experience with entrepreneurs is I thought Providence, we founded in 2008. We were talking to acquirers in 2 years. I thought for sure we would sell the business. And it took me about 10 years to realize that my goal is not to sell the business. That the goal is to solve the problem, achieve the mission. And so the more we started to realize, it's not about how long it takes, we have this amazing platform in the core spinal system. There's 90,000 Americans a year that get a neck fusion that need more than what the current standard of care provides, or they fail. They have a non-union. And so at that point, Providence, we had raised about 50 million in venture, and we had everything you could need to build a business. Great people, great supportive investors. And so that's when I realized, I'm just going to put my head down and build a great business. Great, high sales growth, great gross margins, profitable, have an awesome sales force, be really good at clinical trials that create evidence to get the right FDA labeling so that you can tell the right story to the customer. And now I'm going to bring it back to this great business you're building. The problem that I lived as a pharmaceutical sales representative, where the whole primary care market had been inundated, overrun with reps.
Right.
That's what has happened now in medtech.
Got it.
So where our paths crossed, thank goodness, is we're looking at, our senior vice president of global sales, Jeremy Lehner, has had an unbelievably successful sales leadership career, builds high performance teams, wrote a great book called The Point Guard Approach, which is available anywhere you can buy books online.
Yep. Make sure you get it. Everybody heard that.
Yeah, get your copy. It'll change your life. It's a great book. And it's I really respect Jeremy, but what Jeremy is a guy that's had a very successful career, and he's still a young guy. Doing the direct sales model, distributors, field visits, a lot of the same stuff we learned at Kaifan.
Sure.
And he worked at Cardinal Health for a minute too. So, but what Jeremy realized before me is that it doesn't matter how well trained the sales team is, doesn't matter how good the evidence is, the economics, if you can't get some of the surgeons' time, that last mile of delivering the transformation of healthcare, you're stuck. And so I had seen Matthew Ray Scott of the Feed Agency. I'd seen his stuff on LinkedIn during the pandemic. This is 2020. And I started reading what he was saying, and that LinkedIn, like every other social network, this is the moment where you can actually build an audience.
Right.
And that's when I became intrigued by content creation. I didn't know enough that you had to deliver value. I was just experimenting during 2020. I'd share something that was occurring to me.
Right.
Most of the time it would bomb. Sometimes people liked it. But I said to Jeremy, I was like, I think this is the future of selling.
Yeah.
And so this year, at our global sales meeting in January of 2022, I saw your smiling face, and I was tired. We'd went out the night before. It was afternoon, day 3. And I'm sitting there with Dr. McCormick, and when I heard the statistics that you presented about how the customers, I mean, really surgeons, enterprise buyers, really people under 50, certainly under 40, that the way people want to make purchasing decisions, the way they want to interact with industry and really evaluate whether or not to buy something was increasingly done online. And this is on the heels of 2 years, in sheltering in place and not being able to fly. And I was like, this is it. This is it. And so when Evolve Your Success agreed to train our direct sales force, and I saw our sales reps, the ones that were more media savvy, using LinkedIn to share with the community what they knew, deliver value, and then in a very targeted, non-intrusive way, interact with the content that their target surgeons. I was like, this is the future. And I believe it. I don't believe we'll be doing door-to-door sales for much longer. There will always be, in my opinion, a sales representative who is supporting the surgeon in the case.
Has to be. That's never going to go away. That's always going to remain.
It may be done virtually. It may be done through augmented reality. It could be done through an avatar. I don't know.
Sure.
But the personal relationship. We're human beings. We're social species. That's going to always be there. What I'm not convinced, just looking at, if you get a really good medical device sales representative, there's 21 selling days in an average month. You can't get in front of that many surgeons. They don't want to do lunches. They don't want to do dinners. Cadaver labs have become very hard to fill. And so while everyone's doing the old playbook, for a little while, there's an opportunity to be different. And that's what I wanted. That's what I saw in your presentation.
Right.
And so that's why I asked you to coach me on this personally. So thank you.
No, look, that's what we're about. And what's so cool about what you're talking about is it's being led by the surgeons.
Totally.
They've realized that, these social media platforms are giving us a voice and allowing us to develop opinions and spread the knowledge to other surgeons, and even invite patients to a whole new world that medium was not there. And thanks, not thanks, but due to COVID, it really created the need for it, and it grew it. And now it seems like just the sensible way to go, that now all these medical sales reps can get on the heels of and create brands for themselves.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I remember the investment banks that we're talking to about, because the capital, as a company at Providence's size, at some point you stop financing the business through venture capital, and you can take the business public to access the capital markets.
Right.
So we were pretty far into those talks, and 2021 I think was the most medtech IPOs in history. And the bankers, I mean, they're salespeople like us.
Right.
The way they build relationships is they travel 4 days a week. They go to all the conferences, and the traditional IPO roadshow was New York, Boston, San Francisco, Chicago, San Diego, and maybe London.
Sure.
You would, little businesses that lost money would actually charter a plane, because you had to hit all this in a short window.
Sure.
The entire IPO business, all the IPOs that happened were all Zoom roadshow or virtual video roadshows. And I don't think investment banking will go back to the old way of doing it. And so as I was watching a much more, I would say established, not more established, but investment banking, Wall Street's been around a long time. When there was big behavioral shifts to the business model, that's when I started realizing, this is, I think this is coming. And then it also happened, I had written this grant proposal called Remote MedRep, where you would have basically one really good technical sales rep could be at like
Okay.
an air traffic. You could cover 6 cases at once using video, and a number of companies are doing that now.
Wow.
And so, you know, it was one of those things where everything's converging. Digital surgery there's a push behind it that, you know, the constraint is going to be one of my dear mentors, the late Fletcher Eister, the neurosurgeon who passed away a couple of years ago. But he used to say, you know, in medicine, innovation happens one funeral at a time. In the joke being that a specialty like medicine, where the training is based on what your predicate, basically it's precedent based. This is how your mentor taught you to do it. You teach other people. So to break that cycle and ask somebody who's been training for 15 years, you're in your 30s when you start practicing, to think about it totally different, it's really hard. And but that's the fun part about healthcare innovation is there's so much inertia behind keeping it the same way.
Sure.
That if you have a technology that can really fundamentally improve the standard of care, that's a start. Mm-hmm. But usually the biggest successes coincide with a behavioral shift in the marketplace, and they're enabled by an exponential technology.
Yeah.
Something like cloud, which is what enabled Greenlight, or mobile, which is, you know, like enabled all the Uber type stuff. Right. So that's what I quickly realized, that the underlying technology that you build upon, if you pick the right one. So like I picked e-commerce with Jamie for our first, we were right and early. So you fail. but all the apps that have this massive valuations, DoorDash, Uber, they were only possible because mobile, ubiquitous mobile broadband in everyone's pocket. You know, 4 billion people in the world have a smartphone. Yeah. And so ubiquitous Wi-Fi and mobile internet, and then a computer, a supercomputer in your pocket that every year there's like 5 big companies making a better version. Yeah. And so the superpower you're building on is getting bigger and bigger and better without your own investment. And that's the future.
That's the ticket. Yep. That's the ticket. Wow. So Jeff, you know, CEO, serial entrepreneur, started in pharma. You know, now Providence is growing. You're seeing it happen right before your eyes. What's next on the books for you? What's your next venture?
Well, Providence, we're gonna accomplish this mission, and circumferential is gonna be the standard of care. I would expect in the next year or two we will scale up even more, and a lot of that will have to do we got to continue to execute. We're doing this large clinical trial, the FUSE study. We are now up to 30 quota carrying direct reps and sales managers. So Providence is the focus for until we achieve the mission. The likely fork in the road in the next year or two will be public company, big balance sheet, or strategic partner, get acquired. And really, if we go public and build it to 100, 200 million in sales, usually there's consolidation at the end.
Sure.
And so that's the most likely outcome for Providence, whether it's in, you know, this year or 5 years. And I'm having so much fun and still learning that they both work for me. But let's just say after Providence, what gets me the most excited is when I see the physician entrepreneur who has the prepared mind. They see the problems at every juncture in the patient care experience. And so when a physician entrepreneur approaches me, which happens a lot, fortunately, what I really would like to be able to do is help that, you know, potential co-founder really take a lot of the guesswork out of the ABCs of starting a healthcare business, making introductions to the service providers that know exactly what to do. I do some angel investing in just a handful of companies. They tend to be more towards software, just because, well, that'll be another episode, but the commercial model is more efficient, we'll say.
Sure.
But what I'd love to be able to do long term is anytime physician entrepreneurs are thinking about starting a business, that they think of us, unmet need, and I hope I'll build their trust by sharing everything I know for free. To really build an audience, because it goes back to access and this constraint of that last mile to get in front of the most important stakeholder other than the patient, which is the physician. Right. And so my hope is I will have, after Providence, I'll have more time to look at these ideas, contribute, give advice. But ultimately, I'd like to invest more than I can out of my personal assets with my wife, and probably raise a fund so that we can. The big funding gap right now in medtech is seed stage and early. There's a ton of capital for commercial stage companies with FDA clearance and data and patents.
Right.
But there's this chasm like of doom where I'd love to be the first check in. Early stage venture has huge returns when it goes well.
Yeah.
It also is the hardest to pick.
Right.
And so for me, my why, inspiring growth so that we can transform healthcare together. Early stage healthcare innovation. And it's not that I don't I love being an operator and running businesses, and there's so much to learn as a leader. I think it's probably just the curiosity that I have. I like being involved in a bunch of different things. So that would be really fun for me. Helping physician entrepreneurs build great businesses that change lives. Doing that less as a full-time employee, but more as maybe an advisor, board member, coach, and then getting a chance to invest in these things and see them along.
That is a dream right there. I like it. Okay, Jeff, you've probably made so many people happy right now that have ideas with what you're sharing. What's one last thing you'd want to share with our audience? Remember, we have people that are trying to get into the industry. We have sales reps, we have sales leaders, and we also have people that have ideas that would love to be a part of some of the things you're talking about and hopefully one day be funded by you. What's the last message you want to share with the audience?
The first is, if you're involved in sales, marketing, finance, whatever you currently do to make your living, that's great. You've developed a skill and you're compensated for it by a healthcare business. So first of all, value that, sharpen it, honor it. Don't ever dismiss it as I'm just sales or just finance or marketing, because that is the thing that you do uniquely well that others don't. However, be curious. Always ask the question why. Like the whole first principle exercise is if you say the current state of affairs is this, what would it be like if it was better? Why is it this way? And then it's like, oh, it's that way because of insurance companies. Why is it like that? Why did insurance companies become this way? And by continually asking the whys, you get back to the first principles and the problems. But it requires curiosity. And I guess my parting message would be the best that you can be at whatever it is that you do today. And don't think of it, because I made this mistake, don't always be trying to get to the next job. But from whatever perch you sit in the healthcare system, don't be myopic. Open up your view and look for the problems and be curious. And then, this is just advice I was given when I was a kid, is if there's something that you want to do, look for the most successful person or people that do the thing that you think you want to do and model everything they did. And so I think there's a lot if you look at the founder stories and entrepreneurs, there's so many, patterns. And should you decide to the audience to start a business or are even contemplating it, go to jeffsmith.co, it's my website, or hit me up on LinkedIn and tell me you want to talk for a few minutes, and I'll tell you what I think. And it's just one perspective, and let's build a relationship, and I'll follow your progress. And if I'm not in a place where I can, be the first investor, and I think what you're doing really matters, and I'm interested, I'll try to make introductions.
Doesn't get better than that. Jeff, thank you so much for the time.
Appreciate it. Enjoyed being a guest.
And that was part 2 with Jeff Smith, CEO of Providence Medical. It's so refreshing, again, to talk to someone in such a high leadership position that clearly sees the value of social media and what it can do, what it's doing for medicine, and not just amongst the providers of medicine, but amongst the supporters of medicine, like medical sales reps. So I was so glad to have him as a guest. So you might be out there and you might be someone that's a sales rep, and you're thinking to yourself, I love what I heard, and I've always seen the value. In fact, I spend time on LinkedIn and I see things, and I see my colleagues posting things sometimes, and I see some posts get traction and I see others that don't, and I wonder how it all works. One day I'd like to try to do this, but it's really not for me because I have no idea how to make that happen. Well, if that's you, then again, you need to go to evolveyoursuccess.com, visit Improve Sales Performance, and select our LinkedIn program, and then have a conversation with us, and let's see if we can turn you into a thought leader within your department on the LinkedIn platform so that you can be a better resource to your customers. And for those of you that are trying to get into the industry, you've heard me say it once, you've heard me say it twice. This is our 92nd episode, so you've probably heard me say it 92 times if you listen to every one of our episodes. If you're looking to get into the medical sales industry, you're ready to make that career change. Maybe you don't have sales experience. Maybe you don't have any medical experience. And you're thinking to yourself, there's no way I can be in this field, but man, I'm so interested to learn all the things I can. Then you need to stop wondering or thinking you can't and do something to ensure that you do. And that's visiting evolveyoursuccess.com, select Attain Medical Sales Role, fill out our application, and then have a conversation and let us help you get to where you want to be. And lastly, if you're a sales rep and you want to make this year your year, maybe you heard this episode and you're thinking, I get pretty good access to my customers, but I know it can be improved. And so many of them are so hard to reach. I've heard about social media helping, but I really don't know how it works. Then you need to go visit evolveyoursuccess.com, select Improve Sales Performance, and choose a program. We have a LinkedIn program. We have a sales improvement program. Either one is going to help you utilize social media to be a better resource. As always, we do our best to bring you guests that bring insightful information, that bring innovations. And not only that, but we do everything we can to just share insightful information on this podcast, and we will continue. So thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and you will be hearing from me next week. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.